Hi, I'm Justin Mormon.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to our next episode, Regulation. How do we know? Before we get started, if you've enjoyed listening to the podcast, we always really appreciate it if you give us a review. Again, preferably 5 stars is what we're looking for, but we'll take any review, to be honest with you. And we will, we just appreciate that, whatever platform you're on. I haven't said this for a while either, but if you have ideas of what you would want us to talk about or an idea for a topic, we get those every now and again from people. If you're somebody that sent one of those in,
it's on the list.
We've got a list. Like, it's going. We record kind of far out, so just know that it's potentially coming. But we love to get those ideas too. It helps us along, helps us come up with what we know people want to hear from us. So that's good. But leave those reviews. We'd love it. All right. Regulation. How do we know? So one of the things that we're aware of is that sometimes people come back into, like, there's maybe a big moment with a student, and then people are trying to figure out, is that student ready to come back into class? I think sometimes what we see is that and like just move on with their day. I think sometimes what we see is that people will have students come back in before they're ultimately regulated and ready to be there. Sometimes I think what we see, or that we've noticed over just the years, and I know it's something that I've really paid attention to over my career, is that it can feel like the adults are maybe worried or just kind of trying to avoid setting the, like, quote unquote, setting the kid off again. Because they're like, so then they maybe aren't getting the student all the way regulated and before they return to class. So, and that obviously can cause different issues moving forward in the rest of the day. So today we're going to talk about that idea of regulation kind of during, after a crisis moment or a bigger kind of behavioral moment. And then, like, the process of getting the students to really reset, or how we kind of know that they're ready to go, maybe even a little bit less of the process, but more how we're understanding that they're actually ready, how we're gauging if they're in a good spot to return. So maybe the students had a big moment. Now that moment's over, that big behavior, that crisis-ish kind of moment's over. We're coming back down from the event, and now that's what we're going to talk about.
Yep.
Does that make sense? All right, so let's kind of start off first. Just cover the basics. What is regulation?
I looked up a lot of, like, to see what, like, the definition of regulation. It's all over the place, so I'm going to give you
It is all over the place.
I will give you what I am considering regulation.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting. I didn't find one that I liked.
Yeah.
Online, personally. So here's my interpretation of what regulation is. It's a steady presence in the body that allows it to function at full capacity, an executive functioning task. So when we lose regulation, we lose language, reasoning, executive functioning, breathing is labored, and we are grabbing for control.
Okay.
That's how I set up and defined it. What about you, sir?
I looked up a bunch of stuff too, and same. It was very interesting that there are so many different definitions. We actually, I won't say anybody's names or anything like that, but when our PLC group we have at our own building, we recently had been talking about regulation, and this very topic came up, like, how do we define? Like, what is it? And one of the people in the group brought up that another person in the building had defined it one way, and they were like, oh, that's interesting. I define it differently. That's not how I define it. So then they were kind of asking how everybody defines it. It was a good conversation, but it was interesting. That kind of clued me in on the fact that, like, we're not all thinking about it as being the same thing all the time.
So I guess hear that if you're working with teams or your administrator, worthy time to define. When we're saying, is a kid regulated, what does that even mean? Yeah. What's the baseline definition for your building or your team? Yeah.
And it's good. Yeah. Good to be able to make sure that people are all using the same definitions to languages. So anyway, I think emotional regulation can refer to, like, that process through which, like, the kids are influencing their own emotions, things like that. How you are experiencing what's happening around you. When they experience the emotions and how they express them. So ultimately, what I tend to say in, like, a very non-official way is that a student who is regulated is, which is super interesting. I use the word steady too, who's feeling steady, in control, and ready for what's happening next.
Yeah.
So it's just like they're kind of in a good spot. I'm in a good spot. I'm ready to go. And then what's coming next? So after big dysregulated moments, how do we know when a student is regulated again? Like, what are we looking for?
I go back to state dependent functioning in terms of the ability to think beyond seconds and minutes. Can we speak to a long term plan for the day? Verbal language has regained that they're able to talk maybe in more sentences than words or phrases. Able to ask and answer questions. Breathing returns to a steady rhythm. Able to process events, accept consequences or restoration that needs to happen, and follow simple directions. So when I think about simple task, I think one of the things I've learned from somebody that we worked with was just even getting kids to put pegs in a pegboard, simple puzzles, coloring, look and find things that are helping to re-engage the very simple tasks to get their brain to start working up to that higher order. If they're able to do some of those things, I think those are always good signs of regulation. I would love to hear what you have to say because I think you're really good at this.
Oh boy. I didn't answer this. No, I've got some stuff. I think weirdly, to start off, this is probably a bigger question than what it seems like it is.
Yeah.
I think people would probably assume that they can tell if just a person in general is regulated again.
Yeah.
Or certainly a student. And I think it's a lot harder for anybody to tell that about somebody else than what you think, because so much of it is also happening inside. There are certainly exterior factors that you can be looking for, but I think that it's hard to tell because there's so much going on inside of a person that we can't see just with our eyes. So I think it's a lot bigger question. I think we could probably go over a ton of different signs and things like that, from a lot of stuff you listed, right? From voice, tone, all those kind of things, like how a person's talking, what they're looking like, how they're moving. For me, I think a pretty important first step in finding out if a kid is regulated, because I can't just look at a person and know. You can't. I think that if you think you can, you're wrong. That's what I'm going to go ahead and say that. You can probably have some pretty good ideas if a kid is in a better spot than what they were, but to really say like they're completely regulated and ready to go just by looking at them, I don't think you can do it. So then I've kind of slowly over the years from watching other people and just trial and error have come up with some things that I'll do, kind of like you referenced a little bit, to kind of see if a kid can function in a way that's still in a controlled environment before I just kick them back into a full-fledged, hey, you're just back in a room, have at it kind of environment. So one of the things that I might do. So while I might do some things that I know help that particular student, like I think about like tips and tricks from like an OT, like maybe this kid likes it if I like do dots and squeezes on their arms, or if I give them something to draw. Like there's things like that I'll do. But I'm typically, if a kid is dysregulated in general, I'm typically waiting for them to kind of initiate
Re-engagement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's kind of one of my first steps, because one of the things I see people do a lot is like the biggest part of the moment's over, and now like I'm peppering you with like trying to get you to say all the kind of right things and to ultimately just say the right things, or hear me say the right things and agree to the stuff that I'm saying, to where now I can get you to go. Because we want it to be over, and we also feel the pressure of getting a kid back to where they should be in a classroom and learning.
You're actually supposed to be providing SDI with some other kid right now, and now you're spending your time with this kid, so there's some rush to like, I have to go to this reading group, so we got to go. You got to get back in there.
Yeah, and I think even then there's like good intentions behind a lot of it. I think we're like, well, we want the kid to get back into class quick. We don't want them to have to miss out on something. And I think those are all like okay things to be thinking. But I think that if I'm the one that's kind of like pulling a kid along through a conversation or talking through what happened and getting them a plan to move back, if I'm like pulling a kid along through that, man, the chances of it being successful are slim. I actually learned this like way back when I was first starting off, and I was a paraprofessional in that separate facility, right? And one of my jobs was to have the students who were super dysregulated, right? So again, you imagine a separate facility, everybody's trained to work with pretty intense students, and then like I was getting called to work with the students that those people were like, we need them out of here for a little bit, and I had zero experience, and so what a job to have, right? Like it seemed like a poor decision overall, but like it all worked out. But I learned a lot by trial and error and by watching what people did well and watching what people didn't. And what I learned was I watched the same kids come back over and over and over again if people were pulling them through that regulation kind of process at the end and being like, okay, and now you're good though because of this, and are you feeling all right? And are you ready to go back to class? And like asking a lot of questions like that. Do you want to come out and sit here now? Like, are you feeling like you can come sit out here? Not bad things, but if you were kind of ones pulling, I saw that kid again super soon. The ones that we would wait, and I'd basically be like, I mean, you tell me. Like, if you don't want to talk about it, we can sit here for 2 hours. Like, if you want, you don't want to. Like, you tell me when you're ready and when you want to talk about what happened and whatever. So I just think that that's an important thing. I'm not saying you can't help guide the conversation, but be careful that you're not dragging somebody through the conversation and kind of pushing them to be regulated over just allowing them to be regulated. And I know it's kind of maybe a weird concept to think of, but that's kind of where I start. Is a lot of times I'll wait for the kids to re-engage with me. For me personally, I might give a student a direction that has no real meaning behind it. This kind of goes back to the pegboard idea. But like if we're like in maybe a more contained area because something was real big, I'm going to probably give them a simple direction like, oh, hey, kind of weird, but can you move from that chair? Can you actually sit in this other chair? And then I gauge how they react. I watch what their face does. I watch if do they argue with me right away? Do they question me right away? Why do I have to move into that chair? Okay, like they're going to probably give you a way more intense direction or request than that back in a classroom.
Yeah.
I gave you a pretty simple one. And I'm not saying these things necessarily, but I'm gauging it, right? I'm seeing like, does their face scrunch up? Are they annoyed? Do they just roll their eyes real big? Again, not that means that they're not okay to go back into class, but it does help me know where they're at when I just ask them to do something pretty simple. Like, hey, can you scoot? Like some kids getting on the floor not too long ago that I was talking with, and I was like, hey, it's kind of weird, but can you scoot actually out from over there over to here real quick? And then I watched if they did or not. And did they? How did they do it? Did they go over there and then kind of punch the microphone? But did they go over there and kind of punch the wall as they did it? Were they like annoyed? You know, it's those kind of things. Because you have to gauge their reaction. And so it's not just whether they followed. I do that not to just see if they'll follow a direction. I mean, that's a little bit of it. But I'm doing it so I can like gain more information. Like what other information can I get by how they reacted to that request or to that direction? And that's helping me inform me on where they're at. Because I can't just look at every kid and see where they're at. So I have to be able to like get clues. And that's one of the ways I can do it. Because again, like once they get back into a classroom, they're going to be given directions bigger than that. And I feel like I have to always give like a lot of like disclaimers. So listen, my caution to this is this. Don't do it in a way that's jerky. Don't do it in a way that's like trying to prove a point to yourself or somebody else in the room that they're not ready, right? Don't do it over and over and over again. Don't be like, hey, can you switch to that chair? Now I want you to switch back. Well, you just rolled your eyes at me, so obviously you're not willing to whatever. Yeah. You can't, like, don't do it to try to prove a point. Like, it's literally trying to get information that helps you and then helps the student. That's what you're trying to do with this.
Because then it becomes a power struggle.
Yeah, it gets weird real quick. Like,
But honestly, you're saying that, and I have been in experiences where that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I've been guilty of doing that at times.
Sure, yeah.
So I would say then it comes about compliance and less about the connection regulation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think anything you can do to kind of figure some of that stuff out. And we've talked before about like, I think we've had an episode, surely we've had an episode of how
if not, write it down.
Where's the note sheet of helping students like through a crisis moment and like, what are we doing? What are we asking? Go back and find that one. Remember back in the day when we used to know what episode numbers were?
I actually do. I think they're like 9, 10, and 11. Yeah.
Holy cow. Well, I think there are a lot of good things that you can do that also help you gain information, right? You can, as you're processing the event with a student, like everything's done. I will say this, like everything's done, the students come back down. Don't be afraid to like, we have to engage about like what happened. You don't have to necessarily, again, don't force something, but it's good to be able to talk about something and have some kind of resolution to it before we just go back to the rest of the world, because otherwise it's like this looming thing. And then when do you have that conversation? Do you do it tomorrow? Do we do it right before the kids leave? Like, when are we going to do it? Like, you just go ahead and do it now. You're already in a spot that's relatively safe, hopefully, and seems like it's, easy to keep safe. So I think go ahead and have those conversations then. Don't shy away from that out of fear of maybe, quote unquote, setting a kid back off again. So have kind of those conversations then. But in doing that, there's good things you can do, right? There are things like labeling stuff. Like, it seemed like you were really upset at so and so. And the kid's either, again, going to be able to say, yeah, I was really mad at them because of this. Or they're going to say, I wasn't mad at them. I was annoyed. And you're like, oh, now I've just got information. I thought I
Yeah.
knew the right answer. I don't. And you're like, oh, really? I didn't know. Like, can you tell me what was going on then? Because I just have no idea. I say that a lot. I'm like, can you just explain what happened? Because I have no idea. And then let them explain. And then you gain more information. And that helps you develop a plan for what happens when we go back sooner. It really is just so much about getting as much information as you can in whatever ways you can that aren't like badgering and being like, well, you have to tell me. Kind of just, you have to be nice and be caring and being empathetic, but gain as much information as you can, because that's also helping the student regulate more and more and more. And so I think that's all important. That's where I'm at. I'm sure there's more, but like, again, I could go through like that part of it for a long time. I know we have before. We can also have another episode about it again, like what some of the stuff we do in those moments. But for the sake of this episode, I think that's, there's a lot of things you can do in those kind of moments. It's important to be gaining the information.
When we talk about time frames, I think another good thing to point out, some kids it's 5 minutes. Some kids it's 90 minutes before you can get to the point of post-crisis where we're maintaining full regulation back. So I just know that there is
fluctuate for whatever happened.
Yeah, it depends on the kid. It depends on the situation. It depends on lots of factors go into there. So just know there's no magic number. And the other thing I would caution is that I see when things like this happen, the kid sometimes never is able to regain or re-enter, and sometimes that's the safe right choice, or they'll spend the whole day up in an office somewhere. I would really encourage teams to really think about how can we work on getting kids re-engaged into their tier 1 instruction, back into the school environment, because when you do that, you build resiliency back in with the kid. They are learning to recover and they can re-enter. It's not like the whole day's done and over. We can recover from this. We're building a sense of belonging and acceptance back in our community. We will accept and bring you back in. There's some restorative practice things that need to happen with that. And there's different time frames depending on the situation and the staff and all those things. But you're also building some resilience within your team that we can get over this and come back on their side. I'm not saying that's not without consequences, without boundaries, without restitution, but I think so many times it's like, you did this, it's done. You're out for the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it makes me sad. Like, I think there's a lot of pros to being able to recover and reintegrate when possible.
Yeah.
So don't shy away from doing those things because you just feel like they just need to be punished the rest of the day, and they don't have a right to ever recover and reenter and restore on time frames when they're available to do that.
Yeah, not the least of which, one of the things that gets missed is the fact that students are worrying about how they're being perceived by their peers for sure. But man, I can't stress enough by you as an educator. Mm-hmm. I just recently with a student, again, like had not like it wasn't some outrageous moment, but had a moment where there's a little bit of conflict between me and the student, and the person went and was it a beanbag in our room, whatever, went face down in the beanbag, hood up, covered their face. And as we kind of worked through stuff over the course of, it was probably about 10 minutes, we're working through stuff, and I'm, kind of knelt down by this beanbag. I was like, can I see your face? I go, I'm just going to ask a question because the person wasn't talking to me. Kid wasn't talking to me. Because they didn't want to answer. They were also kind of crying. So I'm not getting hung up on them answering out loud. So they're kind of shaking their head. But I said, are you also worried about how I'm thinking about you now? And they kind of shrugged their shoulders. They had been answering no to stuff, and then they shrugged their shoulders. Here, quick tip. If a kid is answering no to things and then says maybe, or I don't know, or I shrug your shoulders, almost always means yes. So, but they just don't want to say it all the way. And so this person kind of shrugged their shoulders, and I was like, hey, can you just look at me for a second? I just really need you to know you and I are fine. I don't think of you any differently. Like, we are okay. It's just a rough moment. We learned from it, hopefully, and now we can move on, and we talked stuff through, obviously a lot more than that. Won't get into all that, but I think it could be easy to think that like a kid just hates me now because I had to draw some line in the sand and then they had this big moment and whatever. Reality is they're worried about how they are
Yeah.
being perceived by you. Their peers, absolutely, but man, they care about how you are thinking about them and looking at them. And so by allowing them to come back in at some point, working toward that as best we can in a safe way, that helps that student know, like, I'm okay, like they're okay with me. And actually, man, it makes them feel like you are that much more of a safe person moving forward. And that's a big deal. So I kind of shoehorned that in there. It's not necessarily what we were talking about, but I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
All right. What are common misunderstandings of regulation?
I think once they stop fighting you, it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Sure.
okay, well, I got them to sit down now. We often see kids return to their quote unquote regular schedule way before they're able or capable of doing so. Guilty about this, and I will share without as experience that I had. Justin and I've rode many dysregulated moments together out over the years. And remember one really tough student we had, and I thought they were ready to go to, I'm talking about lunch plans. And I remember very specifically Justin looking at me and be like, oh, I don't think we're going to lunch today, but I'm trying to get the kid back into whatever. And they clearly weren't ready, but I didn't realize that at the time. I'm thinking, okay, we got this to do, this to do. It was a really good teachable moment for me with you, whether you realize it or not, about we just have to be really upfront about whatever the day is going to look like. You're actually not going to go to this next thing that's happening in the next hour. We'll talk about the afternoon when we get past through these couple events, and then we'll kind of see where we're at.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've been guilty of doing that for sure. I feel like it's a chronic mistake, and that really thinking about what needs to happen in terms of like that state dependent functioning, not just we're talking about when it's a minutes. Now we're ready to talk about the next hour. And I don't think you're ready to go for the next hour.
Yeah.
And so then maybe we can talk about the rest of the afternoon later on. So I think returning too quickly, and for my personality type, thinking about all the things I still got to do. Like who's going to write this out? Who's going to do this? And so I think one thing I would caution people of is really think about your staffing. I think when we staff so tight, we don't allow that flex time or have, I feel lucky that I have the skill set that I can hopefully help or support teams. That's not going to be like that in every building. But I think we got to think about staffing. We got to have a little bit of flexibility so people don't feel so rushed to return. They have staffing and support to allow some time to process and wait that out a little bit.
Yeah. I think so. A couple things, because I think, you're absolutely right. I think people again shy away sometimes from talking about what is going to be like, what are the consequences for our actions? Mm-hmm. Because understandably, like some moments can get really big. They can get really big and really intense. And now we're in the world we're talking about, we're now calmed back down enough to be like, things are safe. Things feel okay. Everybody's heart rates are coming back down. The idea of then now looking at a student being like, now the next thing that's going to have to happen is this. You're not going to get maybe this thing that you wanted because I can't really trust you in this situation. And here's why. And I'm sorry about that. The idea of looking at somebody and doing that, knowing that it might escalate again, I understand why people shy away from it.
Yep.
Right? It is hard. But I tell you what's a lot harder is not trusting that it's going to be okay, not thinking that student's okay, having them go to the lunchroom, and now it gets real wild in the lunchroom again. That's kind of on us. Like, because we maybe knew and we had an inclination, but we were a little bit like apprehensive or afraid, or we weren't feeling like we wanted to watch it escalate again. And we were just going to cross our fingers that it was going to be okay. That's kind of on us. And that's not a great way to ultimately treat a kid. Like, either, because now we've put them and a whole lunchroom full of kids potentially in a spot that feels intense and feels chaotic, per one of our episodes a few episodes ago. So it's hard. It's hard to know, but I think I am a big believer in letting students know if there is going to be a consequence that's happening. I'm probably going to go ahead and let you know what it is now, while we're in a spot where we're kind of contained and safe and whatever else.
Controlled. We talked about this controlled chaos, right?
Yeah, right. It may get big or chaotic again, but at least we're in a spot where it's
you're staffed.
Stable.
You're in a safe space. No one's going to be harmed. It's more talk about that, like not controlled chaos, like sending the kid back into the lunchroom, and then we're not in a contained space. You may not be staffed, and now we're doing this all over again to control
my gosh,
the
how many
chaos.
exits are there? How many adults are even there to help if something happens? Like, it's all those things that you have to think through. And so A lot of times kids are okay and understand what the consequences are. Sometimes they're not, and it does get big again. And you hopefully are trained and equipped to be able to do that. And if it's been enough for you today, that would be one of the moments where you ask somebody to step in, be like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but like I've got to step away. I need a break from this." And again, those goes back to systems, whatever. Get too much in the weeds on that, but like you have to have systems for that. I think that slightly different direction for this on misunderstanding regulation. I think sometimes, and I'm going to talk about not necessarily right after an event, okay? Because this also came up in our conversation. So many good conversations at our staff thing the other day. But a student looking like excessively happy.
Yeah.
Like really like jubilant. I don't know what word to use, but like almost like manicky, like real, like I'm coming up and I'm like I'm coming in for the day and I'm really happy. That would also not be a regulated person.
Yeah, they're like hyper arousal.
Yeah, like regulation doesn't have to be like, or dysregulation doesn't have to be like they're doing something quote unquote bad that are breaking a rule.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be like that. It can be like I'm really sad. And just kind of off on my own and being really sad. I'm like, good example. Think of like the high school couple that breaks up, right? Mm-hmm. And one of them's crying in class and sad, and that person is dysregulated. They're not trying to like throw a pencil at you, but they're dysregulated. They're not ready to learn. They're not in a steady spot. They're not okay. Like right now, they're not ready to learn about physics. Like, you know, like they're not, that's not where they're at right now. So just understand that like when we're saying regulation, dysregulation, whatever, it doesn't have to necessarily be that. Like there are all kinds of things that can look like that. I will say like when you are dysregulated though, and it might look super happy or super excited or even super sad or super whatever, fill in the blank. If you're riding really high in one of those feelings and you're dysregulated, it's that much easier to cross over to something that does potentially get unsafe, right? It's way easier, and we try to tell our kids this a lot in our classrooms so they can recognize it. And I'm like, if you come in and you're like, kind of wild and kind of crazy, man, I'm talking to my friends real loud, and I'm like almost running down the hallway, and like I'm laughing really loud and whatever. It is crazy easy to watch that same kid in the next 3 minutes become super upset and really mad and having like a really big reaction to something that didn't go the way they wanted to because they were dysregulated already. It just looked like happy dysregulated. And so just know that, understand that, like it's really more about like what spot they're in general. It can look a lot of different ways. And I think that's something that's misunderstood a lot. And so that goes for these moments too. Just because we get the kid, they've calmed back down, and now we're kind of joking about something with them, which is fine to do, and they're laughing about the thing we're joking about, and they seem okay. That doesn't mean they're regulated necessarily. It means that they're able to have a conversation. It means that they're maybe think what you said was funny. That doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to like go back in and engage in class. And so again, you're going to gather as much information as you can by potentially having them do something, by potentially asking them what they're thinking it's going to be like when they go back in class. Maybe you're giving them information like, now I know in the past we've gone back in this class and maybe this is what the teacher wanted you to do right away and that made you upset. They're probably going to want you to do that thing again. Are you going to be able to handle? What are you going to do when that happens? What do you think you might do when that happens? Are you going to be okay with that? Or are you not? Like things like that. You're getting information. You're also giving information and hoping that you can prep a student the best that you can to re-enter.
And just to put science to what you just said, like you're talking about the window of tolerance, right?
Yeah.
So that hypo or hyperarousal, we're looking at that window of tolerance when kids are really in that regulation state of operation for sure.
Yeah. All right. What are the effects of avoiding dysregulation with students?
Yeah, I would say students never learn.
What do you mean? Can you tell me what do you mean by that too? That question. I know I asked the question, but you wrote the question. So let's see. What do you tell me what you mean by that question?
I think there is some tiptoeing around, right? Because we're stressed or nervous or dysregulated ourselves about avoiding another set off because we don't know if we can emotionally or systems wise take on yet another dysregulated situation.
Yeah.
It's like avoiding the conflict with your spouse kind of thing. You know,
okay.
like I just don't know if I can take it right now. So students, when we do that, I think students never really learn boundaries. They are not able to overcome dysregulation or utilize tools and strategies.
Yeah.
We've got for kids to be able to have skill attainment, it goes to that natural teaching environment. We're going to pre-teach what to do when we're dysregulated if we don't allow them to experience dysregulation, or it's even parenting with your kids. You don't let your kids experience unhappiness or dysregulation or boredom. They don't know how to utilize toys or tools to overcome that. Never have a sense of true regulation because they're constantly, their nervous system's probably always teetering right on the border of hyper or hypoarousal. They're never in true state of that window of tolerance because we never let them fully get themselves regulated because we're avoiding the dysregulation. They need to lean on their interoception cues. So if we're not getting them to start understanding what their bodies are doing at that time, and then lack of relational currency is established because you haven't actually done the hard thing or rode the ride with the kids to be able to say that you can do that. And then I think it just comes back to having respect and responsibility for your team and the kids around you. So when we avoid all that kind of falls apart, and we're really just living in that chaos or that semi-controlled chaos because we just don't want to experience again.
Yeah, I feel like more than anything, I agree. You had a lot of good stuff in there. More than anything, I think we're just no longer being proactive, right?
Yeah.
Those are all proactive kind of things that you're describing, and I think we're just not being proactive anymore if we're just trying to avoid all these potentially having a dysregulated student. We're walking on eggshells all the time. So if we're not acting on something we think we should, kind of out of fear of dysregulating a student, then we're ultimately asking really for more trouble, I think.
Yeah.
We're probably going to end up with a lot more dysregulated students, and we're going to be a nervous wreck all the time. Like you're going to constantly be worried that it's going to go away you didn't want it to go, or no, now that kid got up and started walking around the room. Last time they got up and started walking around the room, back to that corner where we have all that stuff, it got kind of big. They threw a bunch of stuff. They broke some of my stuff. I had to call my principal down. Mm-hmm. It became like a really big deal last time. But I think if I say something, it's going to be big. So I'm just not going to say something. Like you don't want to be in those situations. You got to go ahead and set boundaries. And again, I know we keep saying like, don't be it in like a mean, nasty way, whatever. But like you do have to set boundaries, and you can do that in a caring, loving way. What are you going to say?
I would say empathy and relational currency, right?
Yep.
There's a way we talk and approach kids that's respectful, it's kind, it's privatized, it's all those things. But yelling out across the room, hey, sit down or whatever. Proximity is a great tool. You're starting to feel that. I think way underutilized tool. Proximity changes a lot of behavior.
I use that a lot. I know we talk about a lot of other things. If I pay attention, like I'm doing that almost all the time, getting close-ish, making my presence known. I don't say there's so many times. Every year I get obviously new students. Potentially they come up, and it's funny like how many times the newer students reference like hand motions I make in the room, and they're like, "Well, you do this when it's time for us to put our computers away."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I do that. But I don't say like, hey, everybody, it's time to put your computer away. Like I kind of like get some attention, kind of wave my hand a little bit and almost do like a wrap it up sign.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that is kind of how I do it. That's kind of how we end our day. I don't even tell everybody that we're gathering our stuff up and getting ready to leave. But it's like things like that. Like you can do without having to say a whole lot. Sometimes saying more is not great.
Yeah.
All right. How can we avoid or calm staff's anxiety surrounding experiencing dysregulated kids? How can we make people more comfortable with experiencing dysregulated kids?
I can't say enough. Training with the right people to understand what being with dysregulated kids and have logged some time doing it.
Yeah.
Practice. I think something I think both of us have to be really mindful of because we've been doing this for a while. Is to make sure when we have new staff that we have to be intentional about inviting them in to practice regulating kids. We're not always perfect. It doesn't always go right. But I know one thing we talk about a lot is when we have new staff, having them go and watch and model and be with us during dysregulated times. So that modeling, coaching with the practice. Systems, having really strong established systems so that you have a plan and you know what to do. When this happens, I know to do this. Because when dysregulation happens, so does your functioning level. So having those systems kind of overrides that piece. Debriefing, talking about the incident afterwards and make sure that we come up with plans, checking in on people, reflect. I think just humanizing the part that this was really hard. Are you doing okay? How can I help you? And then really it's that wraparound support that we're going to provide the teams and the kids and the staff and the other kids in the classroom. You got to think about everybody. It's a lot of multifaceted things you have to look through. But when everybody feels comfortable, we keep on saying the kids have to know the adults have it. The parents have to know that the staff has it. When
Yeah.
those things don't feel good, then that's when we usually have some pretty big conflicts.
Yeah.
We have to train our staff so that everyone feels comfortable with them taking it on.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think those are a lot of really good things there. I think our staff, I agree, needs to feel like they're supported if they need it with a particularly dysregulated student. And I think we're actually pretty good, like systematically in schools at supporting a lot of instances of dysregulation. I think where schools tend to struggle is when the dysregulation is looking more like angry and like mad and potentially like just not following the directions, right? We've got pretty good systems in place for like students that are super dysregulated because they're really sad. Like
Yeah.
we've got pretty good systems in place for that. We've got all kinds of things. This is not necessarily any different. I think maybe if you're struggling with this idea of this, if you start thinking about the systems you have to set up in a school in that way, that this isn't different than what do we do if a kid has a family member who passes away and they're incredibly sad and they just can't be in class. They're really struggling with it. For the couple in high school that breaks up and they need to go see a counselor, all right, we've got systems in place for that. This person's really struggling. They need to talk to somebody, and who can they go talk to? If we start thinking of the behavior kind of dysregulation, like that we don't want, if we can start thinking of that in the same kind of ways and kind of get people on board with that, I think it potentially gets us buy-in for people to like accept that there are going to be new systems in place. So if you're trying to change stuff over in a school, I think that's one of the ways to do it. Hey, this is not necessarily any different because we're still talking about dysregulation. We're just talking about one of the types of dysregulation. Here's how we're going to go ahead and do that. And we probably even have systems in place in a lot of places for if a kid's like running real high, like real excited, real happy, just typical kid, like way too energetic. We do things to help that kid come back down naturally. We don't just automatically say like you're out of here. Like
Yeah.
we are like, oh, like you need to like go burn some energy off, or maybe you need to go somewhere kind of on your own for a minute and kind of be quiet, like, and help yourself come back down from things. Like go be with this person. Set up those systems. I think that's something that can be done. So very much to your point. So let's see, what else did I have? Ultimately, experience is going to be the king, right? I think experience is going to calm staff's anxiety more than anything. So many staff members, I think a lot of schools could potentially have a system set up where if they come across like a really dysregulated student or a student that's becoming very dysregulated and it's more of like an upset, angry, whatever kind of situation that makes us feel uncomfortable, the system is you have to go somewhere else with somebody else. And then I never really have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Not to like intrude on another episode, and this episode's going long, but like that can sound like a good idea, and it can sound like a way that you're like quote unquote supporting staff by doing that, by like taking those kids out. Really though, like you got to think longer term. I mean, we're doing short-term solutions then. You got to think longer term. What's actually going to help? Well, what's actually going to help is helping staff members experience what it's like to work with a dysregulated kid. Not like leaving them there to drown on their own. Exactly what you pointed out.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe they're just there while you're working through something with a dysregulated kid. And they're just there. They don't have any real role in it besides just watching and taking it in.
Co-regulation and documentation.
And then you talk about it afterwards, right? And you explain why you did some of the stuff you did or why you said some of the stuff you did with the teacher. And that's going to help them learn more. And then all of a sudden it's like an I do, we do, you do, right? Like then sometimes, I mean, I did this for a good number of years. Like this is how we helped people start learning how to work with really dysregulated kids. Now I'm going to be here alongside you. I'm right here with you. But I want you to take the lead on it today. And so now that person's doing it. They're practicing it and they maybe say some stuff, but they have a safety net, right? They can turn to me or turn to whoever and look and be like, is that right? And then, get like yeah, that's good. Like kind of like, yeah, good work. Like, or no, that was stop saying that. Like, you can have that. And then eventually you do that a handful of times and that person gains more and more confidence. What we're quick to do is to just pass off or we want to quote unquote help the kids or the teachers. And so as administrators or other, auxiliary kind of staff, we just take the student away and then we help them get regulated and then we return them and we've spent all the time with them and that teacher has not gained any new skill at all or any more comfortability with being able to actually deal with the situation themselves. And what this ends up doing is if they get more comfortable with it and they gain that skill set and they get that kind of real world kind of in the moment training, they actually are going to be able to avoid having that student get so dysregulated in the first place. More and more, it's going to save so much more time on the end. And they're going to be better, not just for like that one student for a few days or for a school year. They're going to be better for the rest of their career. I mean, imagine the amount of time and how much help that's going to help students over the next 15 years, 20 years, 30 years for that have that teacher if they gain that kind of skill set and that kind of confidence. So I think, again, it starts with the modeling, and then you can kind of do it with them and then help them kind of do it on their own. Anyway, it's kind of like, it's ultimately the idea of stress inoculation a little bit, right? Or maybe exposure therapy a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think you can do that and you can train people along that way. We train people in society that way in all kinds of fields. And it's funny to me that sometimes we don't do that in like a teaching field. So I think that's the biggest thing. So I would encourage you out there, if you're in a district or in a school and you're like, I don't even really, maybe I'm an administrator, or maybe I'm a counselor, or maybe I'm somebody who has time to be able to help in these kind of situations. But I don't know that any of us feel really that comfortable with it. I'm going to tell you, you go ahead and start getting yourself trained more. Like you go out and seek training. You put yourself in those situations, try some things. You ask to go maybe observe in another school where somebody does have the skill set so that you can gain the confidence in it. Like you got to make sure though that there are people that can start training others in your building and can kind of do this to kind of walk people through it. But if you don't have it and you're one of those people that maybe people would count on to have it, start getting better at it because it's a big deal.
Yeah, it will sink your whole school culture and climate if you can't pull it off, right? 100%.
Great way to do that is by listening to all of our podcast episodes. Just throwing that out
now.
there.
You'll be good by the end of the year.
Yeah. Contact us for training.
Yeah.
All right. What do you want people to walk away knowing?
Speaking of that, professional development, I cannot talk enough about professionally developing people. And it's not just telling them information. It's facilitating conversations. It's following back up. It's checking on them. It's giving them the science, giving them the law, giving them the practice. So that goes back to the training, being there with them, coaching, mentoring. But that comes with finding the right people with experience that are able to do that. Supporting our staff is essential to feel confident and competent in being present and ready for these moments. Once you have established this, these moments are never easy, but your automatic response is calmer and clearer when you need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never just becomes ho-hum, but
always
it
heavy.
does. Yeah, but it does become way more manageable and you don't get dysregulated yourself nearly as much. So that's a good point. I'm just going to double down on what I really just said. I think schools need people who are in a spot that can stay regulated during dysregulated kind of moments and really big moments, and somebody that can model. And I learned personally from being around, I know I already referenced it, but I learned from being around a lot of people who are really good at staying regulated in tough situations, and also from being around a whole lot of people who weren't good at staying regulated in some intense situations. And I learned, hey, this seems to work well. That does not. I need to not make sure I'm not doing that. Every school, or at least certainly every district, but I would say every school needs people and can benefit from people that are available to model this kind of approach. And that's hard. That means somebody has to really go out there and get trained and understand it, and not just kind of a little bit understand it in like a superficial way, man, start like really understanding it on like a not hypothetical level, but like on an experiential. I've seen this with people. This is how the human part of it works. Future episode coming up, I'm sure, but how the human part of it works. That's important. And so find ways to go do that. All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you guys listening in and joining the conversation. Hope that it was helpful in some way. Hopefully there's something you can take away from this. If you're struggling with some dysregulation in your school, maybe have your group, your team, your whole staff listen to this and maybe have a discussion about it and figure out what might be useful and what might not be from what we said. Yeah. That's okay too. And as always, let's go out there and do the work.
Let's go do it.